You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lanero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. We're without Justin again today. He has the flu, and unlike any pro athlete playing in a flu game, he decided just to call it off like any sane human being would. So we're joined by Bobby Gomes, former Millie Maker winner. We have the Wednesday stream and the Sunday morning stream. So if you're familiar with the website Football Diehards, you've probably heard of him. Bobby, how's it going?
Going well. Excited to be on the show. Hopefully I could fill in Justin's shoes. I hope. I don't know.
I tried to show up at Justin's house with a bag of intravenous fluids. He thought the needle was too big. I don't know. It's an issue. I'm Bob Harris, here to guide you through the show. We got a couple injuries this week, guys. Nothing like Kyle. We were talking before we started the pod. 2 weeks ago, every single person alive was hurt. I think there's nothing. I mean, a lot of players going on IR. Hit the main page of the website. You'll find the listing, news and views and breakdowns of the guys that have gone IR, but nobody that should catch you off guard, all guys who already weren't playing. Some of the guys of interest, though, some of the changes of interest, we have Will Grier takes over quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Kyle Allen is on a bit of a bad roll there, throwing more interceptions than anything else. So the Carolina Panthers are going to take a look at him. They'll have to see what they have this offseason then. Cam Newton coming off the foot surgery that he just had this past week. That'll make things interesting there, and not to mention a new coach coming on board at some point. So plenty of moving pieces there. For now, Will Grier comes in. How scared does that make either of you about DJ Moore this week, Bobby?
I don't hate DJ Moore at all. I think he's fine. I think you definitely roll with him. I would have more trepidation if it was Kyle Allen rolling into another start after throwing more picks than actual receptions to his receivers. So I definitely don't mind Will Grier. I think it's yes. Will Grier's season.
It's been pretty horrifying. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have issues at wide receiver. An increasingly thin group got thinner still. It looks like we're down there. Chris Godwin seems almost certain to not play. I think it's safe to bet. They put Scotty Miller on IR. No Mike Evans either. So we're down to Rashad Perriman, Justin Watson, and Ishmael Hyman. They also promoted from the practice squad. Who was that? Cyril Grayson. Probably someone you don't want to play. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll be corrected here. Kyle will undoubtedly set me right if that's the case. But look, Rashad Perriman coming off a 3-touchdown game against Detroit. Everyone's going to be chasing him. Are you, Kyle?
I mean, I don't know if I hate to use the word chasing because typically I do want to fade that recency bias, but yeah, he's kind of the man now, and I think it is more so clear now that they're both without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Last week it was a bit more unclear as to who was going to fill that role. I expected Justin Watson to get a decent amount of work, and he was on the field a lot, but it didn't really materialize for him. I expect to see both of those guys basically just taking over the roles of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They're both very much in play. But I think the real beneficiary that kind of might have went underlooked was O.J. Howard. Got 8 targets last week, and I think they're just to the point where they kind of like what we saw from the Eagles, that they just have to run 2 tight end sets. As vindictive as Bruce Arians is, he has to get O.J. Howard out there. Last week that came to fruition with 8 targets. I think that's probably to be expected again. Maybe not quite 8, but getting a decent amount of target share for O.J. Howard. I finally feel at least somewhat confident that he won't get benched, but I don't know. Maybe it'll get Tanner Hudson involved. Although he got hurt. Maybe it's Austin Ekeler. I don't know.
I think he's on IR.
Oh no. They literally have to get O.J. Howard involved though. My best ball teams are coming alive at the perfect time.
Jameis Winston dealing with an injured thumb did not practice to start the week any more than he did last week, and look where that got him. A second consecutive 450-plus yard passing game. I think the first guy to do that in regular season play, I think Drew Brees has done it in the postseason, but the first regular season play, I mean, this guy is kind of a wreck. He's heading for a high number of interceptions, a high number of touchdowns. He's almost like you can't stay away from him, right, Bobby?
Yeah, he's been doing really well. Obviously, even without Evans and Godwin, he's still been able to make things happen in the passing game. We're pretty much just are we talking the 3-game slate, or are we talking the whole Sunday slate as well?
Just in general this week. I mean, if you're
Just in
playing
general?
anything
Oh,
season
yeah.
long.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, for me, so Jameis, yeah, I think he's fine. And season long, definitely would be interested in playing him in a total at 50 points total. One of the higher totals on the weekend versus Houston, and back in the game that should be back and forth. And definitely don't mind his weapons. I don't mind going to Justin Watson. Perryman, you can go back to the well on Perryman. Cameron Brate, someone who I'd be kind of interested because they have to run more 2 tight end sets. And just around the goal line, I think pretty much any one of these guys should see work versus Houston. So with this total, I think they're all guys that can be targeted.
Yeah, pretty favorable matchup, of course. And then we have one other injury that we are on our injury situation we need to look at. It's the Vikings running back, Dalvin Cook, taken off the field again in extreme pain. The chest injury, they're kind of being a little bit vague about. We saw it against Seattle. He laid on the ground, appeared to be sobbing as he laid there in pain. Then this week against the Chargers, out early as well. Alexander Madison was already ruled out of that game with a foot injury. So not a lot of clarity heading into a Monday night kickoff. If you're a season-long player, Kyle, are you grabbing Mike Boone just in case?
Yeah, I mean, you have to. I guess I hope you already had Alexander Madison as well. His status still. Do you have any idea if he's going to end up suiting up? I think it's still pretty much up in the air. He was kind of a later in the week scratch last week. So any idea what the status is on him? Because if he's out, Mike Boone is just the guy. Like, I don't want to say no matter what, but what else are they going to do? I think he'd even Schefter said he does not expect to see Cook back in the regular season, week 16 or 17. So it is unlikely that we see him, I think. Very unlikely.
Yeah, I feel the same way about that. And I don't know about Madison. It seems, whenever there's a foot and the guy's rolled out in the week, it's never a good sign. Boone looked like he got some run. Amir Abdullah would likely get some run. Hell, C.J. Ham would likely get some run. So I don't know that Boone is the same plug-and-play threat that I would view Madison as, but 2 touchdowns against the Chargers does not lie. People will need to take advantage of that opportunity. So that's kind of the major stories heading into this weekend, aside from the fact that anyone playing season long, congratulations, you're in your championships. Everyone playing DFS, congratulations, you're about to get some really great information that will help you win all the damn money. So let's look at that Saturday slate, Bobby. Let's kind of run through this one quickly. Who do you like on Saturday?
Yeah, so obviously I think you're going right to the 50-point total. Houston, Tampa Bay. Talk about this from like a game theory perspective. I think that you can leave a lot of salary on these 3-game slates, and I would be trying to incorporate guys like Cameron Brate, guys like Justin Watson. I got to have obviously exposure to Perryman, but I think that by leaving a lot of salary, you really differentiate yourself on this 3-gamer. And I'd be looking for like just ways to kind of do that. As we've seen on the Thanksgiving slate, it's kind of the model for 3-game slates. Leave as much salary as possible, or showdown for that matter as well. And then you're pretty much differentiated in terms of just your overall builds. Kyle, any thoughts on how you attack this?
Yeah, no, it's actually exactly what I was going to say. And this Thanksgiving was particularly just the perfect example because, Michael Thomas didn't really hit. He had, 10 points. Alvin Kamara busted hard. It was, not only was it, differentiating to leave that salary out there, but it was just optimal. You got a better you got a better score if you did that. So, on the smaller game slates, it's just less likely that the optimal lineup uses, 49.9 out of your 50 salary. So yeah, I think that's exactly how I'd attack it. My only thought is on this slate, maybe because the total is so low, the New England Buffalo game is going to go under-owned, even though Josh Allen has slate breaking upside, and on a mini slate it's very viable for him. So I think maybe that's just a game that if it's going to be mega under-owned, Vegas is sharp, but they're not that sharp that I don't think it's not good tournament leverage. So that's probably where I'd look. I don't know. This is probably. Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to attack it. Outside of that, the Rams surprisingly kind of got there last week with the chalk, Todd Gurley, but he did not look great. He didn't get a ton of work. Like it was Patrick Laird levels of work. He just happened to score twice. So maybe the Rams will get a bit of a bias because the process that led to them worked. But man, they just don't seem like the best offense. Now they have to go into San Francisco. They're big dogs. I would think maybe like a San Francisco defense could also go underowned. So maybe those are some different ways to attack the slate.
Are we going to be watching to see if the San Francisco defense is getting healthier? I saw today it looks like Richard Sherman will be back. That seems to have been an issue. At least the last 2 games, they have not been the impenetrable wall. Bobby, do you have a feel for that?
No, I definitely think you could attack the San Fran defense. It's just an issue with the Rams of who's going to get the opportunity and the usage. It's been Robert Woods and Todd Gurley pretty much these last 3 weeks now. So, like, when is Cooper Kupp going to see the snaps uptick? He had the touchdown late, but that has been predominantly Woods these last 3 games. In terms of, like, just San Fran overall, their usage, too, it's like a similar situation. It's not really that concentrated outside of Kittle. Mozart seems like the guy. I think he correlates well with the 49ers defense if you want to go that route, but versus these Rams, even though they have a pretty low team total, it's still a 3-game slate. So I don't know if I'd attack the San Fran D. I think I'd be interested in, I don't know, all defense on the slate. Like it's pretty much, you can probably use the best salary saver, I would imagine. How would you, Kyle? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the way I would go is just to play the lowest owned defense, especially like on this slate. I think like any of these defenses realistically could hit. Like outside of maybe I probably wouldn't be playing the Rams defense. Outside of that, I would either go lowest price or lowest owned because the way the Patriots have played, like yeah, they beat up Cincinnati, but they've been kind of trashy outside of that. Josh Allen can always turn it over, especially as can Jameis. Dude, Jameis gets a special kind of kick out of turning the ball over on the first drive. That motivates him. That like he gets down 7-0. He's like, it's time to come back from this hole I dug us into. But with that being said, that is literally his trademark is turning the ball over. So you can play really any of the defenses. I would just go low owned or like Bobby said, like a salary saver.
And just in general, broadening out to just in general these limited slates, whether it's the Thanksgiving Thursday, this day. Are there any general tips you like to follow, Kyle or Bobby? Anything? Go ahead, Kyle. If there's anything you kind of like to do or leverage to take advantage of them.
No, I think the biggest differentiator is what Bobby said, is leaving salary on the table, like an uncomfortable amount of salary on the table. Like I typically leave no more than like $500 or $600 on the table. Playing in like a bit smaller contest, nothing crazy like the Millie Maker. Like thousands is probably comfortable on this slate. Like it's that's probably the biggest tip because one, it's going to make you different, and two, I don't really think you sacrifice a ton of EV. Whereas like I do think you are at like all costs trying to get up to Christian McCaffrey on the main slate of like 13 games or whatever. On this slate, not so much. So one, you get a lot different, and two, I don't think you really sacrifice much. And two, I would definitely be looking out for like the more like niche plays. Like on the Thanksgiving slate, it was looking for the receivers, really anybody on the Bears, because the Bears were like getting crushed at tight end and at wide receiver. So it was Jesper Horsted was like the one guy who I was interested in, and that hit only because he got a touchdown. But like that's kind of the more niche player you're looking for, much like Showdown, where if you find a cheap guy who you think can get 2 targets. So I think as you get to smaller slates, you kind of start playing them a little differently. That's one way I would look, and the Bucks has to be like the spot you look to do that at. So maybe it's going with like Ishmael, or it's running Cameron Brate. Actually, I think it's probably the contrarian option to go with that. So I think it's like digging a little deeper into snaps and like
Tampa Bay in general, outside of Perryman, like I would have allocation to all those guys. Well, if Godwin sits, like the way to be contrarian is just not to play Perryman. Just play everyone else. Play Ronald Jones. Play Peyton Barber. Play O.J. Howard. Play Brate. Just different ways. You're leaving salary, right? Like, and if you stack them up with the positive game script, like with Winston, you're probably going to be in a good spot, and you can run it back with obviously Hopkins because that's who we're going to play in the plate.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I mean, anytime anybody gets as much interest as Rashad Perriman's getting right now, I tend to turn and run away. So that'll probably be my approach here. Let's look at the Sunday slate, fellas, starting with the quarterbacks. Bobby, who you like at quarterback on Sunday slate?
On the Sunday slate, there's a bunch. Obviously, it's Will Grier season. Like that's pretty much like where I'd probably go in cash games and just in general. It's just a really good play for the price, and obviously he's correlated well with McCaffrey, so that's something that's going to be whoa, I might totally be wrong. I thought that game was on the main slate. Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're right. That's I'm looking at it.
Yeah, they're in a dome too in Indy, so I think that's a good differentiator as QB. Running back, it's probably going to be something that's going to be pretty popular, and it's not going to differentiate you this week, but there is correlation there between Greer and McCaffrey, and it's pretty positive. So I like that route and cash games more than likely.
Yeah, I think you're just one. I actually kind of think he's good. Like he was I'm a sucker for these these, I don't want to say smaller school, but basically the schools that play teams that don't play defense. Anytime you get a guy like Will Grier, another one I loved. I mean, I like Gardner Minshew for the same reason. These guys, you can just put up video game numbers in college, even though they get the benefit of one playing in offensive conducive systems and playing against awful defenses. I'm just a sucker for those guys. So I actually liked him coming out of college. And now I think he has a very talented system of weapons around him. So yeah, he'd be the guy I'd be going to in cash. I don't think you actually look any other way. You don't really consider it. Paying up maybe for in tournaments, yeah, I think that's reasonable. I don't think you sacrifice it. It's not the free square of running backs where you get like a 3,000 starting running back or whatever. So paying up, if it's going to be popular, maybe I move away from it. But man, Russell Wilson, 7K against Arizona. I expect there to be a decent amount of scoring in this game, and I expect a lot of scoring to come from the Russell Wilson stacks. And Chris Carson smashed last week, rightfully so. He was in a good spot. He was without Rashad Penny. But if he's going to be highly owned, I think that's a good leverage play off of Russell Wilson, especially, or off of Chris Carson with Russell Wilson, especially because Chris Carson is not this dynamic pass catching back. So I don't think if one goes off necessarily, I don't think the other one will be as likely to go off. So I like to pay up there. Man, this would be maybe, I don't know, this is probably looking a little too deep, but Dwayne Haskins versus the Giants, if people are going to be on Will Grier tournaments, maybe that's an interesting leverage play. You can stack him with Terry McLaurin. Looked a little better last week.
Oh my God, dude. Oh my God. Just disgusting.
First 20-point game of his career, stack him with Terry McLaurin and ship it off to the bank. They're also with, I mean, I guess one other play would be interesting. I don't know what his price is. Steven Sims got 11 targets last week filling in. He's 4K, although he's actually not projecting his worst value. 11 targets last week. Led the team in targets by, I think it was a decently wide margin. Didn't catch a ton of them because you're catching passes from Dwayne Haskins, but basically filling in the Trey Quinn role plus. So maybe that's a way to go with it. I don't know. That's probably where I'm looking. I think the Russell Wilson stack is probably up there for what I want to do. Also, Dak versus Philly. That's one other spot I really want to look to, is because I expect both these teams to bring out their best games, which they have not done as of late. Although Dallas 1 week ago did, but both these teams just down the stretch have looked like neither one of them wants to win the NFC East. I think we're going to get a good game from both these teams, and of course Philly's pass defense is just atrocious. So I'd be looking to Dak. Love paying up for Russell Wilson. And then maybe the game of the slate will end up being Ryan Tannehill, Drew Brees, and I would just, or I guess it'd be New Orleans, Tennessee. I would kind of lean to Ryan Tannehill. They're the similar price, but Tannehill has over 70% of his team's touchdowns since starting. That's how they've been scoring, whether it be Tannehill on the ground, Tannehill to Derrick Henry, or Tannehill passing to somebody else. So if Drew Brees is going to be the lower owned one of this two, that's who I'd go with. If Tannehill's going to be the lower owned one, that's who I'd go with. I just think stacking this game is probably a path to success on this slate.
Yeah, if you were watching last week, you were panicking through that first half, and then somehow Tannehill just went ahead and pulled it off in the second half, and he seems like he's that guy. Anyone else that jumps out to you, Bobby, that Kyle listed that I can assure you that Haskins will be in many of your lineups, correct? No. Anyone else that jumps out at you from that conversation?
Maybe some Ryan Fitzpatrick and Devontae Parker. That would be a stack that I'd be kind of interested in versus Cincinnati. I think that obviously that Ryan Tannehill, Drew Brees game is going to be pretty hyped up and pretty highly owned. I think a good way to differentiate maybe Fitz. He's around 6K. Fitz could be chalky, but Will Grier is going to be the likely chalk. It's 4,300. Like it's pretty much Will Greer and the next guy. And I think a lot of people will probably go to that game that Kyle hit on in New Orleans and Tennessee. And from there, really, you can just pivot to Ryan Fitzpatrick, to a Cincinnati defense that hasn't been great. Get some Mike Gesicki and Devontae Parker stacks.
Yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick, the quarterback, not named Lamar Jackson, that's about to lead his team in rushing as well. Look at that floor grow. So speaking of that game, we'll use that to pivot to running backs. Kyle, Joe Mixon, unstoppable the last two games, including against the Patriots, 136 yards in a pretty tough matchup. It seems like the Bengals have changed up the play calling a little bit. Since they can't block, they're trying to scheme him and with more tosses and trying to get him outside. It's working. And it goes into a pretty nice matchup against the Dolphins. What do you think?
Yeah, I would think, I don't love Joe Mixon. He hasn't been used as like a crazy receiver this year. He's top 4 targets, looks like twice on the season, but he's got a little uptick in receiving work. I think he's probably just a good play if nobody's going to play him, and I wouldn't be shocked if that happens again because he's the lead back on a trash team and a trash offense. So in that case, man, you're getting 20 plus carries, 3 plus catches a game. So I think the volume warrants playing him if he's going to be unpopular, and if he's going to be popular, it's kind of been like fading, in my opinion, it'd be like fading a Fournette or like Saquon in recent weeks, where you're just hoping he's not efficient on his volume, which is very much in this range of outcomes. So I think that's one where I just play the ownership game, and I don't know, maybe people start getting onto the trend, but I doubt he's like mega chalk, so I think I'll probably have at least some Joe Mixon. On the other side, I guess I want to ask you, Bobby, any interest in Patrick Laird after the big Patrick Laird bust week?
So I faded Laird in the World Championships this weekend, and I thought it was like the best move on the slate that you could possibly make. Just because he really wasn't a good play. Like, he was a good play, but in terms of the other plays that were pretty much good plays, he was a bad play. So, but the week prior, I used him to qualify. I honestly don't want really much of Laird. But the situation is interesting because there is like that recency bias that you can leverage, and I don't mind doing that when I have the opportunity. So maybe I'll have some more Laird than I'm kind of anticipating as of right now. 4,600 isn't the worst price either.
All right, Marlon Mack's coming off, not a great showing. He goes up against the Panthers. Does that generate a little interest for either of you, Kyle?
Yeah, see, I don't know. I think people tend to overweight the funnel narrative, and I think the Panthers have been a run funnel. But since coming back, Marlon Mack has no targets, which isn't awfully surprising. He got a little more work in the receiving game this season than he did last year, but he's still not like a receiving back, and they have a dynamic receiving back in Liam Hines. And he has like 13 and 11 carries. And yeah, it was hard last week for them to get carries down 34-0. But I don't expect this team to do a ton of winning anyways. And I think the Panthers are going to be underrated. So maybe a way to, like, if that's what I believe, is to go like a McCaffrey Panthers defense. But yeah, I'm not awfully interested in Marlon Mack. The receiving game isn't there, and the rushing game isn't like awfully impressive either. So I wouldn't necessarily look to that. Bobby, I want to ask you about one more player you played in the championship. Boston Scott, that was a very impressive call. He's only at 4K. It's kind of like getting a super discounted.
So Justin gave me shit about that play, but it was legitimately my best. My lineup was a brick, complete brick. But that was my best play. And I was on Justin hit me up today and was like, "You played Boston Scott?" And I'm like, "What, dude? Like, it was my only good play."
Yeah, I know that was legitimately a very good play. So
it was a very good play.
Yeah, and you get it's basically, in my opinion, you're just getting this like discounted version of James White on a lesser offense, but really, like, it's not awfully that much lesser based on the way the Patriots have played. Price him up to 4K, but like he still would have smashed that that value last week. So are you just dipping back to him? Like, I guess my question would be, how close is he to cash for you?
He's probably a little too thin for cash. I don't know. Like, the week hasn't really panned out. Like, he's probably, you got to anticipate that he's splitting carries with Miles Sanders, so that would be something that I'd be a little scared of. Myles Gaskins, I would imagine, is a little bit cheaper, and he's projecting better than Boston Scott. He is also Patrick Laird's backup, so I don't know. I might look to Gaskins probably before Scott. with the price increase. It's still a good price, and Scott's a good player. Like, if they don't have the receivers that they had last week, he could definitely see utilization in the passing game. So he would definitely be someone to consider in that situation.
How do we feel about the Chargers running backs going up against the Raiders?
I don't mind the Chargers backs. I just don't. I can't pick one. Like, if it's gonna be Gordon or Eckler. Like, dual backfields aren't for me. But the price is pretty good on Melvin Gordon at 5,600. Eckler's up to 66. I don't mind Gordon at 5,600. How about you, Kyle?
I'll always take this chance to dunk on Melvin Gordon. I know it was a negative game for Chris Banana, but like 7 carries week before that guy, even in a win, got 12 carries. I guess maybe as a factor of the blowout.
He's really bad.
Yeah,
dude.
the thing is,
I get it.
Bad. He's a bad back splitting work. I'd rather play the good back splitting work and Austin Eckler.
He's up to 6,600, and that's a split work.
Yeah, the thing is, I think I won't be playing either of these guys, which basically since Melvin Gordon has come back, that's how I've been playing it. You've missed out on a few smash spots, but like the predictability of which running back is going off is just so low for me that I think it's like worth fading. You don't gain a ton of like value, like expected value by playing either one of these guys. Like you don't get you get a lot of work and not much efficiency by playing Melvin Gordon. You don't get a ton of work, but you get the better back in Austin Eckler. Neither of them, like maybe Melvin Gordon is teetering on a price where I play him, but I don't know. If I want a bad back with a lot of work, I'll just pay a few K extra for Leonard Fournette.
Bobby, break me off some wide receivers.
Yeah, so for at wideout, like it's pretty much MT at this point. Like you just play that guy. He's not in a dome. Might scare some people away. I don't think it should. Price might scare some people away, like 9,300. I don't think it should. I would just play him at all. Like he's really good at football.
Yeah, if you watched the game last night, there should be no question about this.
Yeah, he is very, very good. Like I said, I like Devontae Parker. I think he's in a good spot. Like it's kind of weird because I feel like I'm just going back to guys that. And is DJ Chark healthy? Do we know any?
He ran a little bit on Monday. They're gonna give him a chance. One of the concerns for me with him is he really wants to get 1,000 yards. If they play him, I'm a little worried they get him his 50 yards, 44 yards, and he takes the rest of the day off. But if they do get him in there, and that's still to be determined. He ran. We didn't hear how he reacted to it today. What it was probably going to be key. So Wednesday's practice report, watch that and see what he's doing. If he's doing nothing, not a good sign.
Yeah, Cortland Sutton's another guy too. He didn't play great this weekend. I think he's in a really good spot versus a Detroit secondary that hasn't been very stout since like week 3 or week 4. So I don't mind going to Sutton. How about what are you thinking, Kyle?
Yeah, I like that. I like that Sutton call. I was just looking at the matchups, and that's one that I'll probably be looking to attack. And I think both of these teams have some fantasy value. I think maybe a lock Sutton fan stack would be something I'd be interested in. Yeah, so I like that. Michael Thomas very clearly there's no price right now that we've seen for him that I'm not comfortable paying, and I doubt we get there by the end of the season. I doubt it gets there even like in fantasy playoffs or anything. So in the low end of the spectrum, Chris Conley at 4,300 is still just underpriced, assuming DJ Chark doesn't play. I don't think he'll end up playing at this point. I'd say it's maybe 60-40 though, so don't hold me to that. If he doesn't play, Chris Conley operated as the number 1 receiver last week, led the team in targets and air yards, and surprisingly didn't get there on any like crazy long bombs. He just got there on scoring. But if he's getting red zone work and he has the potential to connect on some deeper plays, which he's done a lot this season, he's one of my favorite cheap options. Outside of that, if the Philly situation is the same, Greg Ward, I think they just didn't price up these mega cheap guys enough yet. So 4,200 Greg Ward is a fine play as well. I can check his price, but I think if Curtis Samuel is going to be anything owned like he has been in recent weeks, this has got to be the spot. He leads the league in incompleted air yards because they just send him out there to run wind sprints. Every once in a while they target him, and it's just typically a duck from Kyle Allen. Anybody is going to be better at getting him the ball. I don't care if Will Greer's not that good. Like he was like a 3rd round pick or whatever. He's like that's a very damning sign for a quarterback. Those players don't pan out. But man, he's got to be better at throwing balls than Curtis Samuel and Kyle Allen has been. So if you want to play, especially maybe if you want to play Will Greer in tournaments and Curtis Samuel's going to be under-owned, that'd probably be a way to leverage it. So Curtis Samuel may end up being one of my highest owned players if he's not among that group for other people.
All right, dive into Justin's Sea of Mediocrity, Kyle. The tight end position awaits.
Yeah. So, oh man, this is an awful price. Austin Hooper at 4,400. Without Calvin, like he was balling out with Calvin Ridley in the lineup. Without Calvin Ridley last week, he got 6 targets. The week before that, he got 6 targets. Both of his games back. Not quite producing the same way, but he's getting the volume we typically expect from him. And both of these were one game they just blew out the Panthers and probably didn't have to run a ton of him in his first game back. The next game, San Francisco, they were just going to Julio Jones. The matchup worked out well and he crushed. But I think you're seeing enough snaps, like last week, 55 of 67 snaps, and you're seeing enough targets that I think it's reasonable to expect we've got the old Austin Hooper back against a Jacksonville defense that outside of last week just quit. Like they've completely given up. And I think last week more than anything, they just played a bad Raiders team. It was the give up battle. And one of them gave up a little harder. But Austin Hooper at 4,400, a bad misprice. Mike Gesicki at 3,600, a guy who I've been going to towards the end of the season. I think I'll be dipping back into that well. And then if I'm stacking the Dallas Philly game, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz both in play. Zach Ertz 6,400 for a tight end, probably getting to the point where he prices me out. So maybe I'll be looking at Dallas Goedert. And one more player I want to mention, Hunter Henry. I know he hasn't had like an explosion game in recent weeks, but he's been on the field for most of it. He's been getting a decent amount of volume, and we just know the talent. Anytime you can buy low, both in terms of ownership and price, which he is at 4,700 right now, on these mega talented tight ends, that's probably just what I'll look to do.
Yeah, Darren Waller nods approvingly at your pick of Hooper. I'll say when the NFLPA, when the union is telling players not to sign with a team, that team has probably got problems, and that would be Jacksonville. Bobby, who do you like at tight end?
Well, this Hooper price is like, I didn't realize how bad it was. This is the reason why we're getting a lot of duped lineups, because we already have a cash game build with 2 guys in Will Grier and Austin Hooper. Those are just like, if you're not playing them in cash this week, you're probably doing it wrong.
And that probably lets you get up to guys like Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey. So as you get like these min price, you're basically min-maxing your lineup. So
this is the reason why pricing is so bad on sites right now. It's really ridiculous. So basically, Hooper's a good play. Outside of that, I think you could target Noah Fant, go back to the well on him. Kyle hit on Gesicki. Outside of that, is there anyone in the low tier that's kind of popping?
So Jesse James got 5 targets last week. They're without T.J. Hawkinson, and he played well over half the team's snaps. I don't know if you need to punt at tight end. This would be more like if you were looking to stack the Detroit game. That's where I'd look to. But he is like projected reasonably well just because he's literally min-priced and saw 5 targets last week, and that role doesn't project to change very much. So especially if you think they're going to be trailing to Denver, who's had they've been actually pretty decent against the spread this season. So if you think they're going to be trailing against Denver, I think Jesse James, I don't think you need to get there, but if you wanted to pay $2,500, I think he is a legitimate option.
Seems reasonable. By the way, keep an eye on Fant for his shoulder. Missed a big chunk of the game, but came back, finished it, and Vic Fangio said Tuesday that he expects him to be okay, but worth watching as we head into the weekend. We are taping this on Tuesday, so there will be a lot of developments. You'll want to check the main page of the website to find out what they all are. Let's jump into defenses. Bobby, which defenses are you targeting on the Sunday slate?
So defenses usually don't matter for me and Kyle, but in tournaments, I think defense does matter, and I think it matters a lot because it's where you can find a lot of leverage. As of right now, like there's not really, like maybe going against the Carolina Panthers with the Indy defense might be a way to kind of target because you figure you're going to get Grier and McCaffrey both in both as chalk and probably in the optimal build on DraftKings or FanDuel for that matter as well. Outside of that, like that would just be like where I'd start. Like there's no one really that's kind of maybe the New Orleans defense versus Tannehill if Tannehill is going to gain steam, I guess.
Yeah, it seems like this week there's some like bad defenses with good matchups, and you're kind of I don't really want to target them. And some of the things you like to pick on, for instance, quarterback or young quarterback, inexperienced it isn't necessarily the best situation, but I agree with you. I would want to pick on Will Greer. Kyle, who do you like to pick on?
Yeah, so oh man, I was nude sprinting around my apartment last week as I ran a lot of Texans defense and Carlos Hyde, and in the first half I think the Titans were shut out in the first half, and I was just like it's if you're gonna get these chalky Titans, which kind of Bobby talked about when you're looking at the Panthers, if you're gonna get chalk core like based around one entire team, you get so much leverage by just like YOLOing the defense that plays against them regardless of matchup, regardless of price. You just like if the offense collapses, which like I was so close to getting that offense to collapse, that you gain so much leverage over the field. So I think if we end up seeing another like Titans chalky week, I would love to run a very talented New Orleans defense into them. We saw what they were able to do against Jacoby Brissett. We saw what they were able to do against a backup quarterback, and that's what Ryan Tannehill is. He's been a very good backup quarterback, but I do think we saw last week, especially in the first half, like they're capable of just running cold because Tannehill's run so incredibly hot that if he ever cools down, like this offense as a whole is just going to sputter to a like racing halt. So I wouldn't mind running like New Orleans defense. Outside of that, Jacksonville 2200 I don't think is a bad punt play. We've seen Atlanta have the highest of highs, and then we've seen them have very lows. So if you want to play Fournette, maybe that's a solid stacking option. And then finally, one of the better projected plays I'm looking at that I actually feel comfortable with is Washington versus the Giants. Washington's defense has been like pretty solid all year. 2800 isn't that expensive, and then the Giants have been one of the more porous offenses. Like they weren't even until Saquon came on in the second half, they really weren't doing that great against Miami. They had a good second half, but we saw in the first half that like they have just like the Tannehill offense, they have like a pretty reasonable floor on a per game basis of just kind of collapsing. So if Saquon doesn't return to old Saquon, I think this Giants offense could be the exact same Giants offense we've seen, and I don't mind paying down for a cheap Washington defense.
Outstanding. All right, we're going to wrap this up. I just want to remind everyone to hit the website often. If you have not signed up for the website, you stumble across this podcast on the Twitter or wherever, just go to footballdiehards.com/free trial. Get you 2 free weeks. You'll be able to check out the Wednesday night roster build video with Bobby and Kyle. One of the most fantastic things you'll see. The only thing more fantastic, Sunday morning when they go live at 9 a.m., and go through the final changes and dial things in for you. Well, you'll listen to this podcast, tons of news and notes and information, plenty of columns and other information. You can also tune in to Football Diehards on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio throughout the week. And on Saturday, you can catch me doing the pregame show for the SiriusXM NFL Radio at the hour and a half leading up to kickoff. It'll be great stuff. Wherever you are. I can't translate time zones because I'm old and it confuses me. Kyle, wrap it up.
Yeah, I think you covered everything. So for myself, at Kyle Tweets here, for our special guest, Bobby Gomes, at Bobby Gomes DFS, and for you, Bob, at Football Diehard. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. You can catch Bobby and I tomorrow, or I guess when this comes out, you can catch us today. Also, you can catch us Sunday morning. And of course, pretty much everything you look at the site, you got a hand to Bob. And so everybody, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next week for the last week of the regular season. We'll also run through the offseason as well. We'll run through the postseason and sporadically in the offseason. So everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.